Silence is one of the most powerful forces a man can use to understand the truth about any relationship. When you choose to stay silent, especially for 7 days, it's not about playing games or trying to manipulate anyone. It's about allowing space for truth to surface. In our world where constant talking, texting, and explaining have become the norm, silence has become a lost art. Most people fear silence because it exposes what's real. It shows who actually values your presence and who only values your attention. When you stop reaching out, stop explaining yourself, and stop chasing, you're not punishing her. You're testing the depth of the connection. You're seeing if your absence matters as much as your presence once did. When a man constantly seeks reassurance or tries to keep communication alive, he unknowingly creates imbalance. He teaches her that no matter what she does, he will always be there. But when he steps back and allows the quiet to fill the space, something shifts. Suddenly, the dynamic changes. She starts to wonder what happened. She begins to question if she did something wrong, if you've lost interest, or if you found peace without her. That silence starts to echo in her mind, creating curiosity, tension, and reflection. It's human nature to want what feels uncertain, and your withdrawal naturally creates that uncertainty. But the deeper meaning of silence goes beyond attraction. It's about emotional self control, the kind of control that Stoic men have always valued. By choosing silence, you show that you're not ruled by impulse or fear. You're showing that you don't need to constantly fill the air with words to prove your worth. You trust yourself enough to let the quiet do the talking. This kind of restraint is magnetic because it communicates strength. A man who can walk away, stay calm, remain silent, even when his emotions are screaming for validation, is a man who has mastered himself. And that mastery is something few people can ignore. During those 7 days, something subtle happens. Your silence becomes a mirror. If she truly cares, she will start to miss the peace and certainty you brought. She'll realize that the calmness of your energy was something rare. But if she doesn't reach out or show concern, that silence also reveals the truth that her interest was never as deep as you hoped. Either way, you win because you gain clarity. Silence shows you what talking could never teach. This is why silence is not a strategy of revenge. It's a strategy of understanding. It's not about teaching her a lesson. It's about teaching yourself self respect. You learn to detach, to let go of what doesn't value you, and to trust that your absence can speak louder than your presence. Sometimes silence isn't about what you lose, it's about what you finally learn to value. When you choose silence, you're not only testing her reaction, you're also reclaiming your energy. Every time you chase someone who takes your presence for granted, you drain a part of your own power. But when you stop reaching out, stop explaining, and simply retreat into silence, that energy begins to flow back toward you. You start to realize how much of yourself you've been giving away in the name of trying to be understood or accepted. Silence gives you perspective. It creates a distance that allows you to see the situation not from emotion, but from clarity. And that's the foundation of Stoic strength, the ability to observe without reacting. Most men don't understand this. They think silence is weakness or they fear it will make them lose her. But the truth is, silence is strength precisely because it requires discipline. It's easy to text, it's easy to call. It's easy to explain your feelings, hoping for validation, but it takes immense power to hold back, to breathe through the urge to speak, and to let time do its work. You're not ignoring her out of spite. You're showing that your peace is not dependent on anyone else's attention, and that sends a message far stronger than any words ever could. When she feels your silence, she begins to sense something she didn't before. Your absence becomes curiosity, and curiosity leads to emotion. She starts to replay moments in her head, wondering if she said something wrong. If you've lost interest or if you finally moved on, suddenly the balance shifts. You are no longer the one seeking reassurance. She is. Silence forces her to face the consequences of her behavior, not through confrontation, but through reflection. It invites her to look inward, something that constant talking never allows. But more importantly, silence gives you the gift of self connection. When you stop reacting, you reconnect with yourself, your values, your boundaries, your goals. You start to remember who you were before the emotional noise took over. That inner stillness becomes a reminder that peace isn't something another person gives you, it's something you maintain within. This is where real confidence grows, not from attention, but from self control. A Stoic man knows that silence is not about retreating from the world, it's about grounding yourself in it. So, while she may interpret your silence as distance, what's really happening is transformation. You're rising above emotional dependency. You're teaching yourself that sometimes the loudest way to speak is to say nothing at all. Because when your silence is rooted in peace rather than pride, it becomes magnetic. It draws respect. It shows that you are not afraid to walk away from what doesn't serve your soul. In the end, silence doesn't just make her notice your absence, it makes you rediscover your worth. The moment you embrace silence, something powerful begins to happen. She starts to notice the shift in your energy. It's not just the lack of your words that gets her attention, it's the absence of your validation. You see, most people are addicted to the attention they receive, especially when it comes consistently. When that constant stream of reassurance suddenly disappears, it creates a void, and that void becomes louder than anything you could have said. She begins to feel it, not because you're gone physically, but because your energy no longer revolves around her. That's when curiosity turns into confusion, and confusion often turns into desire. At first, she may try to act like it doesn't affect her. She'll continue posting, laughing, or pretending like your silence doesn't matter. But underneath, the silence begins to echo in her mind. Why isn't he reaching out? Did I lose him? Has he found someone else? The very questions she never asked when you were chasing her suddenly become all she can think about. That's the irony. Silence makes noise in her mind. It forces her to reflect on your absence, to realize how much space your presence truly filled. It's human nature to crave what's suddenly out of reach, and your silence transforms you from predictable to mysterious, from ordinary to intriguing. But this silence isn't about manipulation. It's not about playing games or trying to make her chase you out of revenge. It's about letting natural balance return. When you stop overgiving your time, attention, and emotions, she finally feels the consequences of what she once took for granted. People don't appreciate abundance until it's gone. By stepping back, you create contrast, and contrast brings clarity. It's in your absence that she begins to value your presence. That's the paradox of attraction. Distance often reveals what proximity conceals. And while she's reflecting, you're growing. You're not sitting around waiting for her reaction. You're using that silence to reconnect with your purpose, your work, your peace. You start to focus on yourself again, not in arrogance, but in awareness. Because Stoicism teaches us that self mastery begins when we detach from external validation. You no longer need her response to feel worthy. Your silence becomes a form of strength, not coldness, but calmness. That calm energy radiates something that words cannot: stability, confidence, and mystery. And that's what truly captures attention. Over time, she may try to test you again to see if she can still pull you back emotionally, but the difference now is that your silence has fortified you. You've learned to respond, not react. You've learned that sometimes not answering is the most powerful answer you can give, because silence, when used with intention, doesn't create distance, it commands respect. In the end, silence doesn't just make her think about you, it makes her realize what she lost: the peace, the presence, and the man who no longer needs to be understood to know his worth. When you stay silent, it's not just her reaction that changes, your perception of yourself begins to evolve too. Silence forces you to face something that most people avoid: your own thoughts. In a world full of noise, attention, and constant communication, silence becomes a mirror. It shows you where you've been giving too much, where you've been seeking validation, and where you've been losing yourself trying to be understood. It's uncomfortable at first because silence removes distraction. It strips away the illusion that you need to be heard to matter. And when you truly sit with that stillness, you begin to realize that peace isn't found in control, it's found in release. When you stop explaining, defending, or chasing, something powerful happens. Your energy begins to rebuild within you. Every time you resist the urge to reach out to justify or to prove your worth, you reclaim a piece of yourself. That's when self respect grows quietly in the background. You start to remember that your time and attention are not things to be handed out freely, but to be earned through mutual value and genuine effort. Silence becomes your filter. It separates what's real from what's temporary, what's worth keeping from what's only taking. She might interpret your silence as indifference at first. She might think you don't care. But what she doesn't realize is that silence is not about not caring. It's about caring enough for yourself to not participate in what drains you. It's about choosing inner strength over emotional chaos. When you remain calm and composed, it disrupts her expectations. She expected a reaction, maybe even anger or desperation, but instead she's met with quiet composure. That calm energy, that grounded presence, starts to speak louder than any words could. It's an energy that says, I'm not running after you because I'm walking toward myself. And that's the beauty of Stoicism. It's not about suppressing your emotions, it's about mastering them. It teaches you that real power doesn't need to announce itself, it just is. Silence becomes your teacher, guiding you toward patience, discipline, and focus. It teaches you to observe rather than react, to respond with clarity instead of impulse. You begin to understand that not every emotion deserves a response, and not every situation deserves your energy. This is how you build emotional control, by realizing that peace is a choice not a reward. Eventually, your silence changes how she sees you. What once seemed like distance now feels like mystery. What once felt like indifference now looks like strength. But more importantly, your silence changes how you see yourself. You no longer need validation from anyone to feel grounded. You've learned that silence is not the absence of power, it's the proof of it. And when you master that, nothing and no one can shake your peace again. When you stay silent, it begins to unsettle her in ways you might not expect. At first, she may think your silence is temporary, a phase, a form of emotional retreat, or even a game. But as the days go by and your quiet strength remains, something shifts inside her. She starts to wonder why you're no longer reacting, no longer trying to prove yourself, no longer fighting to be understood. That uncertainty begins to echo in her mind louder than any words could, because silence, when it comes from a man who once gave everything, becomes a statement of finality, a reflection that he no longer seeks approval nor fears distance. Women often claim they value communication, but what they actually respond to is energy, confidence, presence, and certainty. When you go silent, it's not the lack of words that gets to her, it's the change in energy. She feels the withdrawal of your attention, something she once took for granted. She begins to replay the moments when you cared too much, over explained, or apologized just to keep her close. And now that silence has replaced those efforts, she starts to question herself. Did I push him too far? Has he finally moved on? That's when silence turns into gravity. It pulls her thoughts toward you even when you've stopped reaching out. Silence, in this sense, becomes your most powerful form of communication. It says everything that words can't. It says you've matured past the point of emotional chaos. It says you value peace over persuasion. It says you've chosen to protect your mental space rather than fight for temporary attention. And as she observes your composure, your unbothered demeanor, it creates both confusion and curiosity. The absence of your validation becomes louder than your presence ever was. That's when she realizes the depth of your worth, not because you reminded her of it, but because you stopped needing her to see it. The beauty of Stoic silence is that it teaches you discipline over reaction. You begin to realize that silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to no longer engage in what doesn't serve you. It's the art of detachment, not from emotion, but from dependency. You no longer measure your value by someone's attention or affection. You've learned to be centered within yourself. That's when your presence becomes magnetic, not because you're chasing, but because you've mastered restraint. And when she finally feels that shift, when she notices that the man who once sought her validation now stands grounded in peace, that's when the tables turn. She begins to crave the same energy she once overlooked. But by then, you've already learned the truth. Your silence wasn't a tactic, it was transformation. You didn't stay quiet to get her back, you stayed quite quiet to find yourself. And in doing so, you became the kind of man who no longer needs to be chased because you've already found everything within. When you stay silent long enough, something profound begins to happen, not just in her mind, but within yourself. At first, it may seem like silence is a punishment to her or a strategy to make her miss you, but as time passes, you begin to realize that silence is actually a mirror. It reflects back everything you've been ignoring: your self worth, your emotional strength, and your capacity to detach from things that once controlled you. Silence stops being about her and becomes about you, your growth, your peace, and your power. And that's where the real transformation begins. You see, when you stop talking, you stop chasing the illusion of control, you stop trying to fix what's beyond you, you allow life to unfold naturally without forcing outcomes. In a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, your quiet confidence becomes your loudest message. It tells her and the world that you no longer need external validation to feel complete. You no longer measure your worth through her response, her affection, or her attention. You've detached from the outcome, and that detachment gives you strength she cannot ignore. What truly shocks her is not the silence itself, but the change it creates in you. She remembers the version of you who used to seek her attention, who would text, call, or explain yourself just to feel seen. But now she sees a man who is calm, collected, and no longer emotionally dependent on her reactions. That stability unsettles her because it exposes something. Her control over you was never real, it was given, and now that you've taken it back, she's the one left wondering what went wrong. That's the irony. When you stop needing her, that's when she starts needing you. Your silence, therefore, becomes a signal of strength, not absence. It communicates that you've reached a place where peace matters more than persuasion, and self respect outweighs temporary comfort. It's not passive aggression, it's emotional mastery. It's you choosing yourself without announcing it. It's the understanding that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the quiet acknowledgement that you've learned everything you needed to learn from that situation. You've outgrown the cycle of begging, proving, and explaining. You've evolved from reacting to reflecting. And here's the most powerful part: silence doesn't just make her realize your worth, it makes you realize your own. You begin to understand that peace is not found in fixing relationships, but in finding balance within yourself. You learn to value your energy, to protect your time, and to only invest in what reciprocates. That's when silence becomes more than just the absence of words. It becomes your statement of power. It says, I choose myself. And once you've learned to do that, you never go back to being the man who needs to be noticed, because by mastering silence, you've mastered yourself. And that's the kind of strength no one can take away.